That thought echoed in my mind the night I found myself sitting in a dimly lit motel room beside my stepson, Gary. I wasn't supposed to be there. Nothing about that night was part of any plan. My husband, Logan, had been away for months, a work project that kept him in another city. At first, I missed him deeply. But as weeks turned into months, something shifted. It wasn't just the physical distance anymore. It was the silence, the absence of warmth, the feeling that I'd become invisible in my own marriage. Loneliness has a strange way of changing you. It doesn't always break you, but it quietly rearranges your soul. That evening, I didn't know that a simple road trip with Gary would set off a chain of events that would uncover secrets none of us were ready for. Let me tell you everything from the very beginning, every detail, because the end is something you won't see coming. That morning, as I got ready, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked composed, maybe even confident, but inside I was tired. Tired of pretending that everything was fine. Logan hadn't called in days, and when he did, it was just business talk, short, distant, mechanical. So when I decided to visit my father in another town, it felt like an excuse to escape the emptiness for a while. Gary was in the kitchen finishing breakfast when I called out. "Hey Gary, since you're free today, why don't you drive me to your grandfather's?" He looked up, startled at first, then smiled with his usual teasing grin. "Only if you promise not to complain about my driving, Carmen." I laughed softly. "No promises. But consider it practice before college." Gary was 22, restless, bright, with a spark in him that reminded me of Logan years ago. But he also carried something different. An unspoken weight in his eyes that made me curious. At that moment, I had no idea how much that short trip would change both of our lives. The first few hours on the road were peaceful. The air was warm, and the radio played softly in the background. Gary hummed along, occasionally cracking silly jokes that made him laugh more than me. Despite the tension I'd felt that morning, his light-hearted energy was oddly comforting. Then suddenly, a loud hiss, followed by a sputter. The car began to slow, shaking violently. Gary swore under his breath and pulled over. That didn't sound good. Smoke curled from under the hood. We were miles from the nearest town. My phone had 1 bar of signal, enough to feel hopeful, but not enough to call anyone. We spent nearly 2 hours trying to fix it, arguing, laughing, then falling silent again. Finally, Gary sighed. "There's a motel a few miles back. We'll have to stay there tonight." A motel. Not the weekend getaway I had imagined. But what choice did we have? As the sun began to set, we pulled into a small roadside inn. Peeling paint, flickering neon sign, the kind of place where time seemed to have stopped decades ago. I remember thinking, if Logan finds out, he'll be furious. But at that moment, another thought quietly crept in. Would he even care? At the reception desk, Gary was explaining our situation while I stood behind him, exhausted. When we finally got our key and opened the door, I couldn't help but laugh out of disbelief. The room was tiny, 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 flickering light. A buzzing air conditioner struggled against the heat. "Well," Gary said, dropping his bag, "it's not exactly 5-star, but it's got character." I rolled my eyes. Character is one word for it. The room wasn't the problem. The silence was. The silence made me think too much. About Logan, about myself, about how my marriage had turned into a polite distance instead of a partnership. That night, Gary ordered takeout while I sat by the window, staring at the highway lights. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just tired. Of a lot of things." He didn't push for details. Instead, he just said quietly, "Dad's been weird lately, hasn't he?" The words froze me. "What do you mean?" "He calls but never talks much." I asked if I could visit this summer. He changed the subject. "I don't think his business trip is just work." Something in my chest tightened. I wanted to defend Logan, but I couldn't. Because I'd been feeling the same. That night, I barely slept. At some point, I woke up to the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. Gary was asleep, facing away, the dim light from the parking lot cutting across the room in silver stripes. For a moment, I felt a pang of fear, not of him, but of the growing realization that something was deeply wrong in my life. Why did I feel more understood in the presence of my stepson than I did with my husband of 15 years? I whispered softly. What are you hiding from us, Logan? The storm outside answered with thunder. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Gary pacing. He looked tense, his phone in his hand. Everything okay? I asked. He hesitated, then handed me the phone. On the screen was a photo, a picture of Logan. But he wasn't alone. He was standing next to a woman, smiling, at what looked like a dinner event. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. I felt a chill run down my spine. Where did you get this? Dad posted it on his work page. He deleted it an hour later, but not before I saw it. For a moment, the world went silent. Logan, the man who barely texted me back, smiling easily beside someone else. I wanted to say something, anything. But all that came out was, let's just get the car fixed and go home. But deep inside, I knew nothing would be the same again. We finally managed to get a mechanic to tow the car. While waiting in the small diner across the street, Gary looked lost in thought. Carmen, he said suddenly, maybe you shouldn't go to Grandpa's today. Why not? Because I think you deserve to know the truth first. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a printed email, sent accidentally to his old shared account with Logan. The subject line, proposal and next steps. The sender? The same woman from the photo. And inside, words that shattered me completely, discussions about moving forward together, and keeping things discreet until after the transition. The transition? That's when it hit me. Logan wasn't just leaving for work. He was planning to leave us. By the time we got back home the next evening, I felt like a stranger in my own life. The house that once felt warm now seemed like a museum of forgotten moments. That night, I waited for Logan's call. When it came, his voice was calm, casual, as if nothing had changed. Hey, you made it safely? We did, I said flatly. Anything new on your end? Same old. Just long hours. Silence. Then I said quietly, I saw the photo, Logan. A pause. Then the faint sound of him exhaling. I was going to tell you, he whispered. When? After you disappeared? For the first time, there was no anger in my voice, only exhaustion. He tried to explain, words like confused and didn't mean to, but they all fell empty. Later that night, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars. Gary joined me, a quiet presence. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded slowly. I think I've been pretending for too long. He sighed. Sometimes pretending feels safer than facing the truth. I smiled faintly. Not anymore. And in that quiet moment, I realized something important. The night in that motel didn't happen, so I'd question my loyalty. It happened so I'd remember myself. For the first time in years, I felt the courage to start over. Not as a wife or stepmother, but as me. Weeks passed. Logan came back, but by then I was already gone. I'd packed a few things, moved closer to my father, and started a new job teaching art classes at a local school. Gary visited often. We didn't talk much about what happened. We didn't need to. The silence between us had turned from something heavy into something healing. Every once in a while, when the sun set and the air smelled like summer rain, I'd think back to that night in the motel. The night that started as an accident, but ended as a turning point. Life is full of surprises you can't predict, I said again, this time smiling. Some surprises break you. Some rebuild you. And some simply show you who you were always meant to be. If you've ever found yourself lost, remember this. Sometimes the detour is the real journey. If you're still watching, thank you for staying till the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because more real-life inspired stories are coming your way. And in the comments, tell me, have you ever faced a moment that completely changed how you saw your life?